Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp and I'm the Chief Digital Manager for Dataversity. We'd like to thank you for joining today's Dataversity webinar, Your Data Strategy, the latest in the monthly webinar series called Data Ed Online with Dr. Peter Aiken, brought to you in partnership with Data Blueprint. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the webinar. If you'd like to chat with us or with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. Just click the chat icon in the upper right-hand corner for that feature. For questions, we will be collecting them via the Q&A in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, or if you'd like to tweet, we encourage you to share highlights of questions via Twitter using #DataEd. To answer the most commonly asked questions, as always, we will send a follow-up email to all registrants within 2 business days containing links to the slides. And yes, we are recording and will likewise send a link to the recording of this session as well as any additional information requested throughout. Now let me introduce to you our speaker for today. Peter Aiken is an internationally recognized data management thought leader. Many of you already know him or have seen him at conferences worldwide. He has more than 30 years of experience and has received many awards for his outstanding contributions to the profession. Peter is also the founding director of Data Blueprint. He has written dozens of articles and 11 books. The most recent is Your Data Strategy. Peter has experience with more than 500 data management practices in 20 countries and consistently named as the top data management expert. Some of the most important and largest organizations in the world have sought out his and Data Blueprint's expertise. Peter has spent multi-year immersions with groups as diverse as the U.S. Department of Defense, Deutsche Bank, Nokia, Wells Fargo, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and Walmart. And with that, let me turn over to everything to Peter and to get today's webinar started. Hello and welcome and Happy New Year.
Same to you, Shannon. It's good to talk to everybody and good to start a new year out with a plan. And that's really where we're going to do it, is talk about if you're going to do something with data, it's really hard. I don't mean, like just being hard to do data, but it's hard to get people to pay attention to this stuff. And so a strategy is something that actually will help you. There's no magic fairy dust or anything here. But what we're going to talk about today is how to get people to understand what it is you're trying to do and how if you are able to do your job better, then the organization will be better able to achieve its goals. So what we're going to talk about is specifically data strategy, being able to marshal data assets in support of organization strategy. And in the process, we'll talk about what is strategy, which many people have sort of misconceptions about. Then, of course, we'll talk about what is the data strategy and talk about how the two of those pieces work together. You'll find out, of course, that data strategy is one of the key ingredients for effective data governance. When I'm looking at data governance programs, or more importantly, looking at failed data governance programs, because let's face it, we've all heard stories. A lot of data governance efforts haven't worked out as well as people wanted them to. One of the main reasons is because they lack a direction. A strategy is something that focuses the mind. And what we want to do is focus on 3 broad goals around data strategy. The first one is to improve your organization's data. After all, your organization's data is its most powerful but poorly managed asset that it has. It is the only asset that we have that is non-depletable, non-degrading, and durable in nature. And so making that as an asset better is akin to maintaining the fleet of cars that another organization might consider to be an asset. But another part of data strategy is we also need to improve the way people use their data, because having good data and not knowing what to do with it is still a problem for organizations. Only when you've improved the data and you've improved the way people use the data can you start to work on what really needs to happen, which is showing people how to use data to support your organization's data strategy. There are some prerequisites for this, 3 main ones we're going to talk about. The first one is a lack of organizational preparedness. Second one is there are severe lack of data competencies in many organizations, 9 out of 10 of them. So if your organization understands data, you are in the very much top 10% of organizations. And we'll look at ways of eliminating the 7 deadly data sins, although we don't cover those in this particular webinar. Then I'll give you some specific examples of how data strategy works, and when you get it to the point where it's working well, it should be as easy as the stuff that's on the shampoo bottles: lather, rinse, and then repeat. You'll also see then that it requires a balanced approach. If it's too far weighted one side, the organization will think what you're doing is a science experiment and it provides no value. If it's weighted too far the other side, it's not practical enough and you're not building the existing organizational capabilities that you need to have in order to do this. Of course, we'll finish up about an hour from now and look forward to the question and answer sessions on this. And I'm going to give a shout out here because my mom is actually listening to this one, so we'll see if she submits any questions on this one. Let's get started. Data strategy. Obviously, this is coming from the most recent book. Thanks for the plug, Shannon. And, of course, the book is available at the Dataversity bookstore. Your data strategy should be the highest level of data guidance available to an organization. It should focus on specific data-related activities. It should be focusing data-related activities on articulated data goal achievements and providing directional but pretty specific guidance when faced with a stream of decisions or uncertainties about organizational data assets and their application towards business objectives. We actually put the entire book on the cover of the book, so if you just follow all those little diagrams there, you'll have the whole book all the way taken care of. How does it start? Well, let's start off with strategy. And if you haven't had a chance to get on this particular TED Talk, it's about a 12-minute TED Talk that Simon Sinek made himself famous, and he had a very good point. We are pretty good at describing what we do as humans. I do this, and I do this, and I do this. We're less good at describing how we do it. Oh, yes, I forgot to tell you that when you get off the floor, push up so that you don't wrench your back. Little things like that become more increasingly important as you get advanced in years on all this. What we aren't very good, though, as human beings is telling people why. And our lack of motivation around this topic is very, very surprising and something that really should be addressed at the educational level. That's not our mission today, but the short answer for his talk is it's not what you do, it's why you do it. Remember, Martin Luther King gave the I have a dream speech. He did not give the I have a plan speech. That passion that's in that statement is what draws people to these shared visions. And unfortunately, you have to do a little of that yourself in order to make your data strategy work well. So let's talk about what is strategy. There was a time in the 1950s where if you said the word strategy, everybody assumed that you were in the military. So it comes from a military background. But we started using it in businesses, and you can see from the little graph, it's gone up in popularity in more recent years. My favorite example of the definition of strategy is a pattern in a stream of decisions. So it means when you're looking at things and things are coming at you, you're trying to figure out what to do. And if you can figure out this pattern, always, actually let me take the opposite, not always turn left, never turn left if you're a delivery truck driver, because we know that left turns cause more accidents than right turns. And so you'll see many of the routing systems now purposely avoid, or the drivers are given specific training in how to avoid left-hand turns. Well, that's a great strategy, a pattern in a stream of decisions. Let's look at a couple of quick examples on this first one. Is Napoleon at Waterloo. Some of you may know your history pretty well and know the answer to this one, but the question comes up. Napoleon, in blue in this diagram, and I'm going to show a couple of views of this. Napoleon was facing a larger army. In the left-hand side of this diagram, the red is the British and the black is the Prussians. And the question was, how do you defeat the enemy when the enemy is larger than you? The answer, divide and conquer. Now, that's a good strategy. What does it mean to actually put that in play? So we look at this diagram here. Again, same picture, a little bit different articulation of it. The blue, again, is the French. And you can see that the little blue line trailing out of the bottom of the French forces is their supply line. The British, however, were supplied out of Ostend, which is up there in the upper left-hand corner in the red. And the black is the Prussians, again, being supplied out of Liege. Now, these locations are not critical, but what Napoleon observed here was that if you hit somebody in the face, they're more likely to run towards their food than away from their food. And he figured if he could hit the British and the Prussians in exactly the right location, he would make both of them run towards their food. Think about it. You're in the army, somebody's shooting at you. Do you run away from your food or towards your food? Naturally, most people run towards their food. That was part one of his plan. Hit them hard at exactly the point where these two armies meet. Second point, though, was that you then have to decide who you're going to go beat up first. And in Napoleon's plan, the original plan was, first I'm going to go around and beat up the Prussians. Then we'll go beat up the British. Now notice this is not something about which the Army could have any confusion. if Napoleon's army had gone in and said, okay, half of you guys get the British and half of you get the Prussians, they would have gotten beat up. In this case, and this is considered a brilliant example of military tactics and strategy, they first all turned to the Prussians, and then they all turned to the British. So that was the strategy. It had to be simple enough so that every soldier in the heat of battle could actually do that. Pretty amazing stuff. It's considered a classic example of military strategy, as I said, but it didn't work. But that's okay. We still teach it because it's a really good thing. Let's take a non-military strategy. Most of you have heard of Wayne Gretzky, great ice hockey great, and his definition strategy is also very interesting. He skates to where he thinks the puck is going to be. Because if he's standing next to the goal and somebody passes the puck to him, he can hit it into the goal. But if you've ever watched ice hockey, you know that chasing the puck around the ice is not an easy thing to do, and consequently you're always going to be playing catch-up, as 9/10 of our organizations are doing just exactly that from the data perspective. Now, I mentioned before organizational assets. Most organizations consider these things the list of assets they have. However, most people don't think of data as an asset, and yet, of course, it is. I'll give you some very specifics on it, but let me give you an interesting characteristic of data right from the starters. First of all, it's real important, as everybody knows, to separate the wheat from the chaff if one is trying to make food. Data that is better organized also increases in value, and again, I don't think we have too many people that disagree with that. What most people don't understand, though, is that poor data management practices are costing organizations a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort. And the reason for that is because 80% of the data in your organization is ROT. ROT is an acronym standing for data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And I guarantee you 80% of the data in your organization is redundant, obsolete, or trivial, which means it gets in the way. That's no fun. By the way, this is actually wrong. My wife corrected me on this and said it's not redundant, obsolete, or trivial. It's actually redundant, incomplete, obsolete, or trivial, and we should call it riots. But I have enough problems when I come in to visit your organizations and I call your data rot. If I called it a riot, I think you guys would show me the door pretty quickly. So one of our challenges in data is to figure out which is the good stuff and use that, and which is the not good stuff, and let's get rid of it. We can reduce storage costs. We can reduce the amount of knowledge worker time that's required to process the data. Oh, there's amazing things that happen in there. Bottom line of all this is that 20 to 40% of all IT costs are spent dealing with unnecessary data problems. When you look at assets, as I said before, data is the most powerful, underutilized, and poorly managed organizational data asset. It's the only asset that you have that is non-depletable. It's available for subsequent use. It is non-degradable. It cannot be used up. And it is durable in nature in the sense that it is an asset that you create with the idea of making more assets for your organization in the long run. These are unique characteristics. And this means that at the strategic level, data assets win compared to all of the other assets that you have in the organization. And yet when we look at how it is treated, it is abysmally poor in most organizations. If you Google this phrase on the web, data is the new oil, you will see more than 5 million hits at the Google search engine. This is the worst way to think about data because nobody ever thinks about what are you going to do with your oil. You don't plan your gasoline purchases out so that you can use it all the way. It's a commodity, and this is why it's the wrong way to think about it. As a production function, data is severely underutilized. Instead, I have a better analogy, and I think this one works a little bit, but just add in the letter F on there. If there are any gardeners out there listening in on the webinar, those of you that are gardeners know that planting things has two characteristics that are very different from data. The first one is that you don't just take your seeds and randomly scatter them across the lawn or the driveway or the sidewalk. You prepare the soil for your garden, and that takes some effort. Second thing is you do not plant tomatoes on Tuesday and expect to eat them on Thursday. It doesn't work that way. We have a lot different process to do this, which requires care and nurturing. And these are much more analogous. The next time somebody says data is the new oil, just raise your hand and say, could I give you another way to think about it that might be even more useful than data is the new oil? And I think you'll find you get some success that way. It gets people thinking a little bit differently. I was over in Saudi Arabia last year, and they loved this. I changed it from bacon to chocolate, but, you know, like, yes, okay, whatever we can do to get people to pay attention to data, that's really the key. And as a unique asset, data deserves a strategy for dealing with it, its very own strategy. Data also deserves attention that is commensurate with other organizational assets. You have a person who is in charge of all the physical assets of the organization called a chief financial officer. There does need to be an enterprise data executive, some are calling it a chief data officer, for all organizations. Now, we're not doing a CDO talk on this one, but I can tell you right now, many of the CDOs are having trouble because they don't have any staff and any budget. So I'm not sure what good it is to be in charge of something if you can't do anything about it. Again, there are people sitting around the table that manage these other assets. There should be somebody around the table looking at it from a data perspective. And finally, we do have to admit that for the past 30 years, minimally, we have neglected data in a very large sense. So there needs to be professionals who come in and help to correct and make up for the past errors. This is hugely important because if we don't get people to understand this aspect of data, then they have very trouble seeing it as something other than part of IT. Most CEOs still don't recognize data as an asset. We see about 1/3 that are coming up and saying, yes, I recognize data as an asset. Some of them are quantifying the value. And we'll look at some quantifications in another webinar later this year in a series. 22% of them say they have information assets that are well cataloged and inventoried and defined. I don't actually believe that's true. My experience is that most organizations trying to do repositories and things, again, it goes back to that 1 in 10 rather than 1 in 5. 1 in 10 of these do not regard information as an asset. That's fine. And 10%, as I said before, are directly monetizing the information assets by selling them outright. Very, very nice bit. But what happens is most organizations are simply unaware. They simply do not know what their data they have, what knowledge workers are doing with it, and where it's located in their organization. And what that means is that they were ignoring the problem. And if you ignore the problem, you can't expect it to get better. By the way, I have a really good argument that we are repeating from our colleague Micheline Casey, who gave it to us a couple of years ago, which is that if you're having an argument with somebody and somebody's arguing about whether data is important or not, this almost always will help you win that argument. There will never be any less data than right now. And if you wait 10 minutes and say it again, it will still be true. So let's look at how data fits in to a couple of contextual constructs here. First of all, data governance and data strategy, I've already told you a little bit about. Data strategy is what tells the data governance what it should be focusing on. It provides the guidance for that. It's what the data assets do to support the strategy. Similarly, the data governance then comes back and gives feedback to your data strategy and says how well is that data strategy working. Both of these, of course, are subordinate to the organizational strategy. That is data support for the organizational strategy. We need to have some data. There's no way of existing without it, and yet most organizations are doing this in a very haphazard fashion. We can also look a little bit further. You'll notice that in Peter's world, at least, he likes to have IT projects subordinate to data governance because, after all, that is what IT is doing, delivering data to the organizational parts, whether it's other machines, other people in the organization, or other partners without it. The IT projects, of course, then have a direct impact on operational success, and that is how is IT supporting the strategy. But you can see the data part is almost always a secondary effect in that. We add in a couple feedback loop here just to see how it all works together, and that's the picture that we'd like you to take away. I have to say, those of you that have bought the book, this is the only figure in the book that was screwed up totally, and the book gives a completely different picture. So if you have the book, send me an email, and I'll be glad to send you the right picture on it so you can put it in there. And subsequent versions of the book are correcting it, but it was a little disappointing for us to not have caught our own error there. All right, so that's what data strategy does with data assets. Now let's look about how this works in data governance. And two of the biggest pieces that start out in data governance are big data and data science. So I want to address them very briefly. First of all, anything that we're defining with a number of V's, you know, is mainly a marketing-driven pitch rather than a scientific or empirical pitch. We have no objective definition of big data, and therefore any measurements, claims for success, quantifications at all must be viewed skeptically and with suspicion. So that said, it's not that things that aren't happening out there that are good, but we need to have a better picture of them in order to define them, because right now you could just as easily attribute those successes, if you will, or failures. Our failures in big data are actually at the same level of all IT projects. 1 in 3 of them succeed. So that's not good. But all of these will allow you to come about and say, hey, from a big data perspective, nobody knows what they're talking about. By the way, if you have to have this kind of a definition for it, it's a problem right away. Some of you may want to go back up and look what Justice Stewart was originally talking about when he said, I shall not further attempt to define the kinds of material, but I know it when I see it. Again, that is not how we want to be viewed in this industry here. So because we can't really say what big data is, it's a problem. And I'll challenge you to challenge anybody that comes at you and wants to talk to you about big data to say, no, since you can't define it, and none of them can, let's talk instead a little bit differently. Let's talk about big data techniques or big data technologies, which we can, in fact, objectively identify and specifically delineate from other systems. However, big data technologies or techniques is only one leg of a 3-legged stool. The other 2 legs that you need to have are people and process. So this will allow you to have a conversation now that we focused on what sort of things you should do from a technological perspective. Now, I showed you this chart earlier. I want to simplify it just a little bit and talk a little bit more about how this gets to play in here. When you're talking about data strategy, it's what the data assets do to support the strategy, and that must be expressed in specific, tangible business goals. We like to call them SMART goals because there's an acronym that goes along with measuring all of those. Put the later slide on this. And again, from data governance, what that means is the language of data governance must be metadata, because if you're talking about something other than metadata, you will not have the ability to make sense out of it, and the business will not understand what it is they're trying to achieve. Let's go back to our original definitions, which I gave you before. Improve your organization's data because data points to where valuable things are located, because data has intrinsic value of itself, and because data has real inherent combinatorial value. You value data, again, improve the way people use it, because you use data to measure change, you use data to manage change, you use data to motivate change. And finally, of course, what you're really trying to do is get to what everybody wants, is that new business outcome in order to do that. And I'm going to give you just one example here of a really interesting case. Obviously, it involves RollsRoyce. Now, most of you know that RollsRoyce makes very good jet engines, and we don't tend to worry about jet airplanes falling out of the sky as we travel around the world or around the country. The old model was that Rolls-Royce would sell things to the airlines. The new model is they now sell hours of powered thrust, something they call power by the hour, which means if that engine isn't being employed, Rolls-Royce isn't getting paid and the airlines aren't getting paid. So their interests are aligned. That's a very powerful change on this. Now, just even that is a really, really interesting advance. But let me take it one step further, because, of course, once they had this new model out there, they went and looked around and said, what else can we learn from? And they looked at things where they were taking a look at racing. And what you're seeing here is the way they used to change tires at the Indianapolis 500 in about 1950, I think it was, on this. I love the way they hit the tire with a hammer to get the tire to change. So we're going to watch just a little bit of this. It's about 14 seconds worth of stuff. You'll see I quickly moved ahead, and now he's putting the other tire back on, again, by hitting it with a hammer. So it was a total of 64 seconds to change 2 tires. Great. Now, airlines, are they interested in changing tires? No, but they are interested in changing engines. So they went to NASCAR and said, what can we learn about how you change tires? And you can see by 2013, it now only took them 4 seconds to change all 4 tires. And the airlines are learning about this process. They're calling it wing-to-wing. The interesting part is, when did this business model come about? It sounds like it would be something new, big data-ish, right? Nope. Turns out this model was invented in 1962, and they've already celebrated their 50th anniversary. This is amazing stuff. This is the kind of thing that your management is looking to do to revolutionize an industry around us. That is the goal of your data strategy, is to find something new, but you can't do that until you first improve your data, improve the way people use the data, and then they can use those two skills to improve how people use data to support their strategy. Y'all get tired of me saying that at some point, but that's the way it goes on here. All right, so let's go to the third section here. What are the prerequisites for doing this? Because most of the time when I go into organizations, I see that they are set up completely wrong to be successful with data. We're going to talk about, I'm sorry, go back. We're going to talk about the lack of organizational readiness. We're going to talk about a failure to compensate for the lack of data competencies at the management level in most organizations. The data modelers, the data architects, they know what they're doing. They're just having trouble getting allowed to do their job. I'll say it pretty straight. Finally, there's something I call the 7 deadly sins. We'll just briefly touch on those today in order to do it, but let's go through. Data strategy needs to be implemented in 2 phases. The first one is getting rid of the prerequisites. Again, if you are not sure about what you're doing or don't have the right skills in order to do it, it's probably not a good idea to invest a lot of money in it. So the prerequisites are prepare for dramatic change and determine how to do the work. Recruit a qualified, knowledgeable enterprise data executive and other qualified talent that you need to have. And 3, eliminate the 7 deadly data sins that are in there. Once we've got phase 1 done, we can move on to phase 2, but there's no point in doing phase 2 if you haven't got phase 1 done. Kind of like getting out of bed before you put on your clothes. Let's dive into each of these 3 prerequisites and see what happens. Dramatic change is pretty straightforward. For years, we have had very talented groups of professionals that are interested in changing people's behavior and helping organizations change their behavior. You probably have them in your organization. If you don't, it's very unlikely that your organization has a very good change management process in there. Now, this change stuff has to go up even beyond the CIO level. Most of the executives do not know that they don't know, and so they are able to make very poor decisions very easily. The first book that I wrote in this topic here was called The Case for the Chief Data Officer, but I wanted to call it CIOs Aren't. That was a really good way of getting popular with CIOs. Probably wasn't a good idea. Luckily, somebody talked me out of it. But what that means, and let me show you this too. This is funny. When the book got translated into Chinese, they actually created it as Chief Data Officer Combat. So that was a very, very fun process looking at that. My colleague Mario Faria from Gartner, great analyst over there, one of the first CDOs in South America, wrote a really nice article that I'm going to give you the reference to, but just read a little bit of it. Keep in mind that the appointment of a data executive comes from a high-level decision and can trigger a whole series of problems, including confusion, uncertainty, doubt, resentment, and resistance. In fact, when I talk to CIOs about this, it's split. One out of 100 of them that I talk to, 50 of them will say, yeah, no, I'm not doing much with data, and now it's somebody else's problem. Way cool. The other half will say, wait a minute, if I'm the CIO, what is the CDO going to do? So it's, you know, what do you mean, who you're calling my baby ugly kind of a thing. When you're looking at organizational readiness, there are also a series of prerequisites, and I find they are best illustrated in this model that we've adapted from Mary Littman. She did a great job on this one. When I walk into an organization, I look for the symptoms on the right-hand side. If I'm seeing gradual change and they want big change, they probably have the vision, the skills, the resources, and the action plan, but they don't have the incentive. If I see them frustrated, they probably have the incentive, but they don't have the resources. And you get a picture of how to see that. The bottom line, of course, is that we need to have all of these things in place for an organization to actually implement the kinds of changes that we're talking about if they want to get good at data. And culture is the absolute biggest impediment to shifting organizational thinking about data. I don't have time in this webinar to give you this, but I did purchase the rights for an article that I put in this magazine. So if you click on either of these 2 links, you can go download a case study on one organization's trials from an absolute non-technical perspective. We found it very, very useful. Hopefully you guys will too. All right. We're still in phase 1, the prerequisites. Now what we're going to talk about is recruiting a knowledgeable enterprise data executive. And this is kind of unusual because most people think a good way to build strategy in general, much less a data strategy, is to look at the business and to find out what the business needs are and then come up with a solution. And I'm telling you right here now that is so incorrect. because it leaves out a major variable. That major variable is what is the current state of the organization. We need to understand the existing strengths and weaknesses of the existing systems and people in order to be able to put something in place that they will actually be able to use. Only when we have a match between the two of those should we now start listing strategic data imperatives. If you have trouble believing this, what I'd like you to do is think about handing the keys to your brand new Tesla Model 3 to a 16-year-old that doesn't have any driving experience. And that's the way most organizations deal with this new technology, very, very poorly. We're going to come back to this diagram and talk about execution in just a minute. But let's go to another aspect of this, which is that your organization is all about data from the top going down. At some point, you may make something. For example, at some point, Ford Motor Company makes cars. But there are layers and layers of management where they only do data. They send reports back to each other. They manage by numbers. I'm not critiquing anything about Ford. I'm just saying that at some level, Ford is a data company, and so is your company too. Until you get to the point of actually making something, you're probably more of a data company than you think. And I was quoted recently about that, and I hadn't even realized I had made the comment myself. So I thank Don Soulsby, my colleague, for pointing that out to me. Let me show one other thing that's really problematic too. Most organizations think that data is being taken care of by IT. But what we teach IT professionals about data is usually one course, and it's how to build a brand new database, which means that people who take these courses get the impression that they only need to bring data skills in place when they make a new database. And their managers, who may or may not have gone through IT courses, are either going to get this or nothing. So you can see this makes a problem, because if we're migrating databases, we're not creating new ones, so we don't need organizational data skills. And if we're implementing a new software package, we are also not creating a new database, and therefore we don't need data management knowledge skills. And if we're installing an ERP, we're not creating a new database, so people are not called in. These are reasonable conclusions for people to reach because we have taught them this. And given the educational background that we have given these folks, it is a surprise things aren't much, much worse. One of the things I'm pushing for is much stronger data curriculum in college and universities. And let's, again, be very clear about this. Big data and data scientists are not able to solve this problem because they're not taught anything about this either. It's just absolutely amazing out there how that's working out. I've got another whole talk on that where we'll bore you guys with the details of this. But if we don't correct this, we've got 30 years of absolutely incorrect teaching that we have to go against, which means you can't trust what your IT people are attempting to do because they don't know that they don't know anything about how data works. Now let's go a little further. For some reason, everybody remembers from high school Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the idea that Maslow came up with in the 50s, saying that if you have food, clothing, and shelter needs that are unmet, then you can never, ever be safe. Physiological needs are a necessary but insufficient prerequisite to your safety needs that are also an insufficient but necessary prerequisite to love and belonging, level 3 of Maslow. Having love and belonging is, again, a necessary prerequisite to being self-esteemed. And finally, everybody would like to get to self-actualization, but then you can see it's a ways to go to get there, to get up that. I don't know why this concept of Maslow is one thing that absolutely everywhere I go around the world and talk about it, everybody understands, probably because it's right, and it seems right, so that's good. Data is an awful lot like that. There's this wonderful bit up here about all these advanced data technologies, and if I were going to change this diagram a little bit now, I put blockchain and Bitcoin in the middle of it, which we know have their uses, but are absolutely no more panaceas than any of this other stuff has been, because they are all technology focused. Excuse me, I said that wrong. And more importantly, they are just the tip of the iceberg, and that if we don't understand how to use these foundational practices in here and how these foundational practices support this, we will never be able to do it in the way in which it is originally envisioned. These on the bottom half are organizational capabilities. And without those organizational capabilities, the technologies are practically useless. So this is why we see most organizations struggling with this kind of an approach. Now, at Data Blueprint, we get a couple of calls, and one of them is, yeah, Peter, I know I'm supposed to do all this foundational stuff. My boss wants the answer by Friday. Can you help me out? Can you do it faster? And the answer is yes, you can do it faster. And if you do it faster, it will take longer, it will cost more, it will deliver less, and it will present the organization with a much more risky proposition than you would doing it the proper way, which is to crawl, walk, and then run your way up that pyramid. Let's now take those bottom pieces, the foundational pieces, and move them over into something that the Capability Maturity Institute put together called the DMM. The DMM is the same 5 pillar pieces that we looked at the bottom of the pyramid before, arranged slightly differently here and evaluated. So let's define them first of all. If we're talking about strategy, we're talking about just being coherent about data. I can't tell you how many organizations I've gone into where everybody in one side of the group is making it blue and somebody else is making it orange. And you say, why aren't you on the same page? And they say, well, I don't know. And the answer was, of course, they didn't have a good strategy. They also need to have governance. We have a well-trained set of data management professionals that can now be governed. We have certifications around these areas. Excuse me. The Data Governance Professional Organization, ISACA, several others have certificates that you can sit for and come up with this. Data quality, of course, is making sure that it is fit for purpose, and we want to make sure that we do it with the right technology and the right processes around there. We, of course, need some supporting processes, and the beauty of what was put forth in the DMM here was that each of these can be graded on a 5-point scale. Now, just so that you understand the 5-point scale, you get 1 point if you have a pulse, 2 points if what you do is repeatable, 3 points if you've written anything down about it, 4 points if you're taking any measurements around it so you can find out whether you're doing it better or worse last time versus this time, and 5 points if you sit down with people and say, hey, how's it working for us? Could we improve the overall process? That is the CMM. If people don't understand it, I guarantee somebody in your management chain will understand CMM, and all you have to say is this is CMM for data, and they'll go, oh, okay, that makes good sense. Because this process is the only 20-year proven research process, 20-year proven process in the research and the industry community to show improved results over other improvement processes. So my first question is, why would you use anything else? Now, understand this also, these 5 areas, governance, data management strategy, quality, operations, and platform, are linked inextricably in the same way Maslow's are. That is, if there is a weak link in that chain, you need to make all of the links at the same strength. So as I said, we can evaluate each of these, and I'm going to go do that and just give you a very quick hypothetical here. We're going to just pretend all of these are at level 3, their governance, their quality, their data operations, their platform, their architecture. But in this case, our hypothetical example, they don't have any strategy. So they could put $1 million, $1 billion into data quality, and it wouldn't help their organization, because if they don't get that 1 up to a 3, we have no ability to take any of the 3s and make them into a useful 4. The entire architecture of this organization's data management practices are dragged down to the lowest level, which is the level 1. And that is a huge, huge problem as you're going through this. Again, you've got to understand this, and most management don't. I mean, think about this. Who sits on your hiring panels for your enterprise data executives? Other executives, no problem, but they don't know that they don't know, so they hire somebody who they think will work, and this is why we're seeing failures in the enterprise data executive, chief data officer range are falling into exactly the same pattern that they did when we first started with CIOs. We weren't sure what they were supposed to do or who was supposed to do it or what talents you should have in order to do this. It's a great area to look into. We got better with CIOs. We can now get better with CDOs. Now, to think about this for just a quick minute, what I've asked everybody to do is make major changes in your organization and do it with people that don't have the idea, that don't have the knowledge and skills to do this. Well, we all know there's no such thing as a unicorn, although I do have this beautiful piece of art from a friend of mine that I like to reference. That's the only unicorn I know in the entire world. So looking for somebody to do this, good luck. Typically what we're seeing is that the first enterprise data executive goes in and gets killed. And we'll have to work on that. Now, maybe that you should use these talented individuals in a different manner. use one as a change agent when they've gone in and make everybody mad, and, moved everything around and moved everybody's cheese, whatever metaphor you want to do, then take a back seat and let somebody else come in since you've done all the hard work on that. A little bit more on that in the book. Let's talk a little bit here about the 7 deadly sins. And I'm going to go through them. I went through these on a webinar a couple months back, so you can go back to the archives and grab that, but I'll just briefly talk about it. We've already addressed some of this a little bit. There are, as you can see, significant cultural and change management challenges that must be addressed. If you don't understand how to implement change management, again, it's a well-defined discipline. So there are people in your organization or people who your organization uses in order to make those changes. So don't go buy a book, find a professional on that one. Sequencing data strategy implementation is hugely important too. Most organizations go, great, I want to do all this wonderful stuff with my data. Well, it turns out in strategy there are only 2 dimensions. One of them is an efficiency dimension, making things more efficient and effective, improving the operations, reducing the friction between groups, all kinds of things like that fall into that category. And we'll go ahead and say Walmart is exemplary in that area. They squeeze absolutely everything they can. Their supply chain management is unparalleled in terms of their expertise. Now, let's look at the other dimension. So again, our first dimension is this efficiency and effectiveness one. The second one is innovation. It goes off in a completely different direction. And let's pretend that Apple's a very innovative company. Well, can you imagine taking innovative people at Apple and telling them to be efficient and effective? Their heads explode. Same thing. If you take the people at Walmart who are really good with supply chain management and say, no, I want you to be innovative, they don't want innovation. They want absolute predictability. The 2 are completely incompatible mindsets, and yet most organizations try to go after this and tell the people who are doing the work to get both of those things at once. It doesn't work. Pick one, pick the other, but don't try and do both at the same time. It is a sure recipe for failure. 5th deadly sin. You've got to manage expectations. Just as when you plant your garden, you don't plant tomato seeds on Tuesday and eat tomatoes on Thursday. You say this is going to take 4 months. At the end of 4 months, we will have nice ripe tomatoes. And by the way, we have to not just raise the tomatoes, we also have to put netting around them to make sure that the deer population doesn't come up and eat all our tomatoes, or the rabbits, or whatever environment you've got in your area. I live in a place where we have beavers, so the beavers are our varmints right at the moment. Anyway, managing expectations, obviously very, very critical. This is a little bit more difficult. Your data must be managed as a program in order to share data across projects. Most of them are trying to do a data program within a project framework. It is absolutely difficult to do and almost a recipe for disaster as well. Let's put it this way, if we look around, that's the result of what we've been trying to do. We're doing a little bit better, but we're not teaching this in college or university, so it's going to be a difficult way to do that. Number 3 is not implementing a robust programmatic means of developing shared data. We can't just take our data and magically snap our fingers and say it's going to be shared. It has to be engineered to be shareable. A good place to do a programmatic means of developing shared data is when you move your data to the cloud. If you use that as a barrier to take your data and make it more shareable by definition, which is an objective scientific characteristic that can be tested for, it is also, it should be specifically engineered to be shareable, and finally, it should be of high quality. You wouldn't want to put data in the cloud that was of lower quality than data outside the cloud, so let's clean it as we go into there as well. But again, not having this as a program is really problematic. Now, I tell people to get in their organization's minds the idea that you will no longer need a data program when you no longer need an HR program in your organization. And that scares people. Whoa, I don't want to make that kind of a commitment. Well, if you don't, you're probably not going to succeed with data. You will no longer need a robust programmatic means of developing and sharing data when you no longer need an HR department. Sound good? Let's keep going. Again, we've already talked about qualified data leadership. Hard to find, hard to follow, really, really difficult. One of my favorite things is that people give me a call all the time and say, hey, I'm looking for this kind of a thing here because the last two we hired didn't work. Yeah, it's a small group out there that actually does understand what's going on in this area. Finally, something I call data-centric thinking. And I'm going to spend just a minute on this because this is an activity I'm going to ask your participation in. In addition to downloading that article, which I think you'll find really useful about the social aspects of implementing data, we are also trying to more objectively define what it means to have data-centric thinking. And so we've put it out there as a dialogue, which means we'll probably get it wrong. But if we don't have a dialogue about it, we'll never be able to improve it. So in the spirit of the Agile Manifesto, which is a very good way of developing more robust software faster, in the spirit of the Agile Manifesto, I actually stole their language. We are uncovering better ways of developing systems by doing it and by helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value, and here's where I differ with the Agile Manifesto. What they did was good for software. Here, I hope we've got it right for data. We value data programs that precede software projects. We value stable data structures over stable code. After all, if the data structure isn't there, you can't finalize the code. That should be an absolute prerequisite in order to do this. We value shared data preceding completed software. If we don't have the data, by the time we finish the software, we will probably create another small pile of data. Okay, you'll be a data blueprint customer sooner or later, but give it a shot. Let us know how it goes for you. And finally, our fourth tenet is that reusable data should precede reusable code. The only code that is being reused in today's environment is the open source software. And the reason it works is because they have a tremendous infrastructure built to work around that particular challenge. They do a great job of it. Most organizations aren't willing to duplicate that effort, and consequently, code libraries are the joke they have always been for the past 10 years. If these ideas are interesting to you, we would love to engage with you on a dialogue. I'm going to take this site and turn it into a wiki so we can actually put comments on it. If you click on any of those pieces, it'll take you directly to it. The website is, of course, thedatadoctrine.com, and we'd love for you to come by and find that and help us get a critical mass of thinking around this particular project. All right, let's go on to our final piece of this, which is, what is the data strategy? The answer turns out to be, first of all, we are right here, and we are going to lather, rinse, and repeat. So I took this concept wholeheartedly, whole cloth, from a book called The Goal that some of you may have read in your lifetime. It's one of those books that people say, you need to read this book, and it's really worth reading. So The Goal is by a fellow named Elhue Goldratt, and he identifies something called the theory of constraints. And the theory of constraints says that in any system of doing things, something is going to be the biggest block. And if you identify that constraint, exploit it, and elevate that constraint over top of all other constraints and continue until you address that constraint, you will reduce the biggest block that is holding your organization back. And what do you do next? Identify the next biggest one. Now, I went through that quickly. Let me go through it a little bit more slowly and carefully so that you can get this. But this is straight out of Elhue Goldratt's theory of constraints. In delivering data support for the organizational strategy, something is the worst barrier that you have, the worst constraint to it. You need to be able to measure those constraints. You need to be able to have objective ways of having conversations about it and getting management to understand it. Let me make a very stupid, simple example here for you. If you identify the constraint is you don't have any electricity in your organization, you say we can't keep data because we don't have electricity, you're going to have a conversation with management, explain to them what electricity is, why it's important for the use of computing, and then how data on computing platforms can be employed to help the organization support strategy. That's your biggest barrier. That's what you need to work on. There may be other things, and we'll get to them, but let's start off with the biggest one. Then we exploit that constraint. What that means in Goldratt's terminology is that you're just making very, very quick improvements, looking for that literal low-hanging fruit that everybody has and finding the existing pieces that are there. Sometimes that will work. Sometimes you can make some improvements to it. Many times that will not be enough, and you'll then need to do something we call subordination, taking everything else that is not a constraint and putting it out of the scope so that we're focusing on just one specific piece. We elevate that constraint and eliminate other things that are going on. One of the things I like doing when I work with organizations is I go in and I find out how many IT projects they're going on simultaneously. If it's measured in the thousands, and I've been with organizations that have literally thousands of IT projects working simultaneously, and I say to them, can you absolutely assure me that all 1,000 of these IT projects are supporting your organizational strategy? And immediately they kind of go, whoa, I guess so, but you know, if you're going to audit that, that probably wouldn't be a thing. Well, we can't do everything well. We have to elevate one constraint for focus and make sure that we get it. Then the last piece of this is, did that eliminate the constraint? If it didn't, go back and start over again, which may involve a redefinition of what that constraint is based on our study and better understanding of it. If we keep repeating this process around and around, this is where we get to lather, rinse, and repeat, you will get to a series of abilities in your organization to start moving forward on this. Now, I mentioned we started off with this diagram just a bit ago. Remember, business needs, and most people try to do that as how they develop strategy. That doesn't take into consideration the fact that we actually have to see what the current state of the maturity of the organization is, and only when we have a match do we put together some strategic imperatives. Now let's go a little bit further than that and get to the roadmap. The key with your roadmap is that it has to be balanced between some tangible business value that the organization sees and the development of those underdeveloped capabilities that we've talked about in many organizations. We'll go back to our pyramid slide. So on the left-hand side of this is business value. Let's just take a very simple example. If I have a data management group that consists of 5 people, and each of the 5 people gets paid $100,000 a year, well, that's $500,000 that I need to be able to show at the end of the year that that group has added at least that value. And you'd be amazed at how many groups that I go to can't do that simple calculation. If you can't, management has every right to look at you and say, I'm not sure I see how you're supporting strategy, therefore I'm not sure why I see you pay your salary. Ouch, but that is the way it works. You need to be able to show, as a data management group, every year that you more than cover the salaries of your employees and add some value beyond that in order to do this. Why don't we do it? Because we haven't practiced it. And of course, I've got a book out that helps on that called Monetizing Data Management, but we're not here to sell books. Let's instead look at the other half of the diagram and talk about capabilities. I've seen a lot of organizations go for business value, but after they do the low-hanging fruit, they don't have the depth to go in and do the next level of surface analysis or below the surface analysis. Your roadmap needs to show some business value and some new capabilities. If you get the balance correct between the two of those, you will help your organization, because remember, your data strategy needs to be about making your data better, about making the people who use the data better, and how they use that data in support of the strategy in order to come up with those 3 pieces. Those are the capabilities that we're talking about, and if you ignore one, it looks like a science experiment. If you ignore the other, you do not end up with a robust organization that is able to sustain this type of work. Let me give you a very specific example from one group that we worked with. Very interesting group. Of course, they had the first 6 of prerequisites as we talked about it, but the problem was literally they were running out of store numbers. And I want to give you the absurdity of the situation. The board of directors of this retail organization knew darn well that there were not 1,000 stores, but they were using a 3-digit store number that was spreadsheet based, and somehow they had gotten into trouble with this because this store number, as you might imagine, is used throughout the entire organization, and it was very poorly governed. Now, when I say what was happening here, they were going to give out the 999th store number this year, this calendar year, but they knew they didn't have 999 stores. So can you imagine going to the board of directors and saying, we can't open another store and increase our sales and meet our sales goals this year because we ran out of store numbers? And they had to do that. It was amazing. Now, what had happened, really, unfortunately, was that they needed a systems data inventory. They had done one back in 1999 when they were getting ready for Y2K, but they hadn't done one since, and they had thrown away the old stuff because nobody thought it would be needed. They had to go back and recreate the entire process. They also then had to make a plan to take this 3-digit number and expand it to 10 digits so they would never run into this problem again. Then they had to subordinate other pet IT projects, including, in some cases, some rationalized security improvements. They did a good job and said, this is a low risk to us, we're going to postpone security so that we can fix the store number on this as well. Again, elevate, execute, and repeat the above steps until they got all the systems taken care of. Now, the bottom line of this is the most amazing piece, is this was given to a clerk, the task not of fixing the systems, but of issuing these store numbers. And the clerk would sit there and all that gave the instructions to the clerk, well, when somebody asks you for a store number, give them the next number and make absolutely sure you never give the same store 2 different numbers or 2 different numbers to the same store. You can see how that would cause problems. It's a unique identifier for each of the stores. Hey, no problem. But what happened was the associates started figuring out, well, I'm going to work from home today. If I make my home a store location, I can even have DVDs delivered to it, much less my company mail. So they would go by and ask this associate, say, hey, I need a store number. And they go, okay, here you go, 235, 684, 847, 900 and something. And now you can see how these guys got into problem and how getting this data strategy would help them to fix it. Because this is what we're talking about. Data strategy helps you manage data with better guidance. And if you don't have that guidance that you're delivering, it's very, very difficult to show value and also to justify the kinds of programmatic activities that we need to do. So our data strategy tells us how data can be used in and which business processes are going to be subject to the first version of this. Notice I version it. You should have actually many, many versions of this or many instances of it. You should be able to show how data is shared among users, divisions, geographies, partners, whatever it is we're looking for, what processes and procedures allow the data to be changed, and who manages the approval processes and ensures compliance given all of that. So when we look at that sort of a process, what we've done in the last hour is talk about data strategy telling us how data assets are to be used in support of the organizational strategy. To do that, we need to understand that strategy should not be a complex thing. It should be a simple thing because it's got to be easily understandable by everybody in the entire organization, and at least these guys don't have other folks shooting at them. So it should be easier for them, never, of course, really easy. And our data strategy then is about making sure that the data in the organization as an asset is used in support of that strategy. Because if they aren't working together, then we have duplicative efforts and inefficiencies and opportunity costs that are incurred by the organizations. If your data governance initiative is having some trouble, a data strategy is probably missing from it, and it would be a really good idea to help focus the data governance around a data strategy to see if that will re-energize your strategy process. Now, this is outside of regulatory compliance, so make sure that you don't ignore your regulatory issues. Those are going to be more than enough fun for us to get through all of this. But the strategy should look at improving some aspect of the organization's data, improving some way in which people use their data, in other words, giving them skills that they don't currently have right now, and improving how people use data to support their technology. By the way, a little quick thing on the improved data, way people use their data. Check out in your organization and find out how many of your Excel spreadsheet users have never heard of a macro. It's a great example of underutilization. Now, all that is easier to do if you eliminate the prerequisites. They are a lack of organizational readiness, a failure to compensate for the lack of data competencies, and the elimination of those 7 deadly data sins that we've talked about. So data strategy, that's phase 1, eliminate the prerequisites. Phase 2 is implement the theory of constraints relative to that strategy, because that will allow you to get this down to a dull, repeatable process where you lather, rinse, and repeat with a balance between some types of tangible outcomes and some types of organizational capabilities which are harder to be tangibilized. Boy, that's a terrible word, but they will actually allow you to get up along the maturity curve much more quickly. So we're at the top of the hour, Shannon, right at time for Q&A. Let's see what you guys have to say.
Peter, thank you so much for kicking off the new year with such a great topic and so important to shaping our year. So diving right into questions, and just to answer the most commonly asked question, just a reminder to everybody, I will send a follow-up email for this webinar by end of day Thursday with links to the slides, links to the recording of the session. So Peter, absent a Chief Data Officer or top-down strategic program, what do you recommend be done from the bottom up to prove value of data management to the C-suite?
Boy, if I had a question that I would plant and want somebody to ask me to start this off, I would do that. So whoever did that, send me a note on the side and I'll send you a prize for that. Wow. My preferred title for this role is not Chief Data Officer. Even though I wrote a book called The Case for the Chief Data Officer, I think calling them a chief presents more problems than it actually solves. My preferred title for this is the Enterprise Data Executive, because that can exist at any level of the organization. And if you're talking about bottom up, I would make yourself a really fine sign. Use the corporate font and put it on your desk and say, I am the Enterprise Data Executive for this corporation. The lower you are, the more likely somebody is to come by your desk and say, who told you you could do that? In which case you take the sign off your desk and hand it to them and say, absolutely, this is a big job. If not me, then whom should this sign belong to? Making it personalized like that actually does get organizations aware. There is one person in these organizations that makes decisions from a fiscal perspective. It's called the Chief Financial Officer. I would like for these individuals to exist at the chief level, but let's not fight that battle. Let's instead work on developing the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the core competencies that we need to have around data leadership. And I like to call it the Enterprise Data Executive. Shannon, I babbled on that. Would you read the question again just to make sure I got it all?
Sure. Absent a Chief Data Officer or top-down strategic program, what do you recommend be done from the bottom up to prove value of data management to the C-suite?
Thank you. So labels are important. I babbled about that for a minute. The other part of this is the sooner you can show people in the corner offices that this relates to things that they care about. Most of the time that's money, but I've worked for a lot of organizations where the focus was on saving lives or improving the human condition, et cetera, et cetera. You show how data impacts their priorities and they will start to pay attention to you. We call this process monetization. I sat on a panel, Shannon, at DGIQ in June when we go out to San Diego a couple of years back, where they were saying, you can't put a price on this stuff. It's like, oh, absolutely you can. So again, don't want to tout the book too much. It's not a secret. There are ways of doing this. It's just that we're not used to it. And there's a very big difference between it can't be done and we don't have a lot of practice in this. I show people this technique. They get really good at it really quickly. So that's the other thing I would do. Don't worry about the title. But from the bottom up, if you've got that group of $100,000 a year associates, scrape around. Start to get practice at the process of pulling together what you've done for the organization and how it has impacted them. I did one organization where the entire year was focused on the implementation of a metadata repository, and they justified the project on the basis that all the technical associates would save at least 1 hour per associate per year. Now, that's a pretty big number, and that actually came up with a really good cost justification approach. Shannon, I don't remember what month we're doing monetization, but we are doing it at some point, so maybe we can find that out and take a look and let everybody know before the end here. But that is a great question. Thank you for starting me off on that. You can see I really like that topic. That was a softball I hit all the way out of the park.
I love that. Yeah, and I will look up that what month we're doing that. But while I do that, let's move on to the next question. How did you come up with the 7 deadly data sins?
You know, it sounds like a good, clever marketing term. It, of course, didn't come out that way. I was doing some work with a group of organizations, and they were all kind of facing the same problem. So imagine, if you will, all the banks getting together and saying, we're having trouble with this data stuff. We can't share data, but we can at least share metadata. And we did a fairly good analysis of this. And these were common problems that occurred across everybody in this particular group. And we've consolidated that even increasingly on the outside as well. So it is a bit, if you go to that, let me look at what page that was. Let's see. This case study here that I mentioned earlier, there's 2 things that are important about this. this case study is where we actually documented the 7 deadly sins. And again, the case study here is a case study called Succeeding in Data Management. Big company attempts to leverage data. And what they tried to do in one of these situations, it just didn't work out well for them. So we're now teaching this in college and university, which is good. It was published in the International Journal of Information and Data Quality here. The interesting part, though, is if you go to the table of contents, which you can if you click on any of those links there, you'll see that this article, it now has 1,900 downloads, and the next nearest competitor, I think, is 600 downloads. So we're also showing the academic world that this stuff is of interest to them. So that's where the 7 deadly ones came from. Let me just go back over to it, because the 7 deadly ones are actually kind of fun. I'll just put it up to that level there. But, you know, if people don't understand data-centric thinking and they get all the rest of this stuff right, it's still not going to help because they're not going to give it the right time and attention. If they don't understand that they need a data program as opposed to trying to do data out of an individual IT project, by the way, let me elaborate on that just a touch. The only way an IT project can create all the software and all the data within the project is if that IT project is not sharing its data with any other project, unless pre-specified existing data assets exist. And of course, now we're back to our 1 in 10 numbers of organizations that do that. So these were the things we found by doing a bit of research around this. And again, I put them in that article. So if you want to find out more about that, let me know. There may be 8, in which case it won't be as much fun as 7, but hey, what the heck, right? Shannon, thank you for a good question.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't see any other questions coming in. Everyone's quiet. Everyone's still restful from the new year, from the holidays.
Very well, Dave. Well, we do have other events we want to tell you about. But we'll move on from here to data architecture strategies. And I'll keep listening. I'll keep talking. I'll just get Shannon to tell me if I did that to her schedule. But anyway, always fun to talk to you guys and get that going. And we'll do the same type of an approach to data architecture strategies next month on this.
Which is another great topic. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks, and hope everyone is enjoying that new year. And we'll see you next month, as Peter said, and hope everyone has a great day. Peter, thanks again so much for another great presentation. And again, I'll send a follow-up email to everyone by end of day Thursday with links to the slides and links to the recording. Have a good day, everybody. Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.